Mr. Fix-It is here to take on your DIY dilemmas. Text or WhatsApp to 083 3010 103.
Brian Cloonan is here from Cloonan's Hardware in Tullamore, as he has been for the last God knows how many years. Far too long.
Just 30 years, Will.
30 years. Yeah. How long have we
started with Don. I'm saying this the other day. So I started with Don Delaney, and then it was Don Delaney, and then it became
would have been the late Mike Reid.
The late Mike Reid and Fiona Mitchell of RTE fame, and then it became Mike on his own, and then it went on to Fran Curry. No, John MacDonald was next. You're right, and then Fran Curry, and then yourself.
So the longest stint has been with me.
Yes, and it certainly feels like, I know it is the longest stint, but I can tell you it feels like the longest stint ever. The other guys were very nice, I have to say.
They didn't know you as well as I did. Let's get down to business.
Okay.
So, what would be the easiest way to repair a torn polytunnel cover?
So I suppose the easiest way is either depends how precious you are and about how it looks. So you can use silage tape, which is black. Look, it's used for repairing bales of silage. It's a black, wide, waterproof PVC tape. It's as cheap as chips. €3 or €4 will buy you, I think there's 30 metres in the roll. It's 75 mil or 3 inches wide. It's very sticky. It's perfect for that. But it is black, so it's not very attractive. So it'll probably suit you just fine because you're used to that. But I would say the other one then is Gorilla Tape, the Gorilla brand. Now, I'm sure there's others, but they do a waterproof clear tape, and it's really effective. Now, it's only 2 inches wide, and it's much more expensive. I think it's €12 or something like that. But very effective, and it is completely clear. By the way, just listening to your earlier caller from Spain, and I was talking to someone a few minutes ago who's just back from Spain where it was 42 degrees yesterday. But, we could all learn a little bit from it in this fine weather. If you have a room that you're not using that's getting particularly the afternoon or evening sun and you're not in it at that time, pull over the curtains or close the blinds, leave the windows open a little bit to let ventilation through. Open every window that you can in the house during the day to cool it down during the day, but keep the sun out. Like they talk about the shutters. We have curtains. We can close the curtains. It will help quite a bit in keeping now it's not quite as good as having the heat off the glass, the sun off the glass, but it's still better than having the heat come right through into the room. So we could all learn a little bit from what they do out there. Now, the other great thing I think would be a siesta. I think we should all go for a siesta in the middle of the day.
Oh, I vote for that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think most people would.
Brian in Portlaoise adds in with good advice, saying, during this heat wave, formerly known as summer, please leave out water for the birds.
Yeah.
He uses a cat litter tray, which you can pick up for just a few euro in a bargain shop.
Brilliant. I actually use the lid of a dustbin. I turn it up because it's and I put it up. We've a flat roof on the shed, and I pop it up on top of that, and it means that it's harder for the cats and so on to get at the birds because they see them coming across the roof. But yeah, we need to do more of that, definitely.
Our next question, again, 083 30 10 103 on text and on WhatsApp, from Moira, who received a gift of a silver tea set from her grandmother. But it is definitely in need of cleaning. It is, in fact, almost black.
Right.
So she asks, how do I clean it to make it look nice, but not destroy it? Because she doesn't want, if it's of value, to tarnish it, for instance.
Yes, silver tea service.
Granny. And there's one last line which is really important. She says, I know Granny will see it the next time she's over.
Yeah, a silver tea service as a gift from anybody is a poison chalice because you just have to keep cleaning it and it's a real pain. So the first thing to say is we often would talk about if you have really badly aged copper or brass, you would use a strong polish like Peak and you'd use very fine steel wool do not ever use anything like that on silver because you will destroy it. So silver is 99 times out of 100. Silver is a very thin coating on steel or even on brass. So it's called EPNS, EP, electroplated nickel silver. So it's a very thin coating on top of another metal. And if you clean it very aggressively, you end up taking off the silver because it's microns thick. It's so thin. It'll come off if you clean it aggressively. So you always use a silver cleaning product like Silvo or long-term silver polish or Duradlit or one of those things. Now, I would always go personally with something like that. I'd go with what used to be called Duradlit. It's now called Silvo Wadding. And the reason just being that the Silvo liquid is great, but the problem is if there's any grooves or indentations or anything like that, the liquid tends to get caught in grooves. It builds up. It crusts in those grooves. And you can see it. We've all seen silver that is clean and shiny, but then, where the handle meets the thing itself, there's a build-up of this creamy white gunk, and it looks horrible. So if you use the wadding, now it goes black, and it literally will be, in this case, because it is black, it'll go absolutely black. So put on a pair of rubber gloves. It's not harmful in any way. But the reason I always wear gloves doing it is it goes so black, and it's such a thin liquid, it goes right in under your nails and can be hard to clean out afterwards. And you'll end up with nails that look like Will Faulkner's all the time. What I would say is just keep rubbing and rubbing and rubbing, and then have an old rag and a cotton T-shirt and just wipe it all off. And you'll be amazed. It'll come absolutely as new. Now, then going forward, you're probably as well to get one of the... So again, if it was brass or copper, we would say spray it with a lacquer that stops it from tarnishing into the future. But you can't really do that with the silver, unfortunately. So maybe get a silver cleaning cloth and just keep it polished on a regular basis, or wrap it in cling film, wrap each item individually nice and tight in cling film, and then when Granny's coming over, cut the cling film off and put it on the sideboard or wherever you want Granny to see it proudly on display. Because if you keep the air away from it, you'll dramatically slow down the tarnishing process.
Next question. How much Roundup would you add to 5 litres of water? And I suppose that's very much going to depend on the concentration, isn't it?
Well, 99% of them are 360 grams per litre of, that's 360 grams of the glyphosate per litre glyphosate. What did go on say it?
Glyphosate, I think. Yeah.
Glyphosate is the correct, is the normal strength of nearly every brand. So it doesn't matter whether it's Roundup or Rambo or Gallup, or there's 100 different brands out there. Just have a look and see, they nearly all have that. And that means you're putting 120 millilitres per 5 litres of water. And don't forget, you need active growth for it to work. So at the moment, it's fabulous weather, but there's not a huge amount of growth because of today, there wouldn't be a huge amount of growth. But having said that, you do need, I wouldn't spray it in the real heat of the sun. It'll just dry off too quickly. Spray early in the morning or late in the evening, but not too late that there's not. You want about 3 hours of active growth for it to be sucked into the plant, and that'll work really, really well.
For the science teachers who are listening, glyphosate is the correct pronunciation. Okay. I can never remember it either, Brian, and I'm sure Roundup is what 99% of people will refer to. Our next listener is looking for advice to repair a headrest on a leather couch, which has been wearing badly.
That's a difficult one. So what you'd be saying is, if the leather is chipping off it, well then there's not a lot you can do except recover it. If it's just getting dirty or grimy, well, you can get a heavy-duty leather cleaner and then you can wax it afterwards. And by waxing it afterwards, you're putting a clear protective coating on top of it that A, will protect it and stop it from getting as dirty. And if the wax itself gets dirty, it's very easy to remove the wax with just a little bit of alcohol. Will break down the wax and remove it, and then you re-wax it again, so that instead of the leather headrest getting dirty, it's just the wax coating on the top that's getting dirty. And that's probably the only solution to stop it getting any worse. But if there's chips missing, it's a matter of getting it recovered, unfortunately.
Brian Cloonan is with us until 11 o'clock this morning from Cloonan's Hardware in Tullamore. 083 30 10 103 is the text or WhatsApp number, or indeed send a voice note if you really want to pick his brain.
Mr. Fixes with Brian Cloonan. Call 0818 300 183 and put our toolman to the test.
Anne has sent us a photo of her kitchen tiled floor, and there's a crack near the door. She says that part of the kitchen was extended some years ago and then tiled. The crack appeared sometime after that, and it's really unsightly. You've seen this image, Brian. How would you deal with it?
Yeah, that's really annoying, and it's not just, it's right in a straight line. It's about 6 or 8 tiles right at the door. Unfortunately, it just means almost certainly the floor isn't completely level there, and there's either that or there's been a little bit of a settlement crack going on there below the tiles, but I'd say it's just not level. So unfortunately, you'll have to lift those tiles and then investigate underneath and see is the concrete or the surface underneath cracked, or is it just that it wasn't completely level? And when you stand on a tile, so there's no give in a tile whatsoever, absolutely none. And if it's even slightly on or off, it'll crack. Now, the fact that it's in a line like that, I'd say it's more likely the subfloor underneath has cracked. So you may need to get that looked at. But the worry now is, did you keep any spare tiles? So hopefully anytime you do any tiling, but particularly on a floor, because even if everything is perfect, somebody can drop the cast iron frying pan and break a tile and you have to replace it. So you should always keep some tiles from a job like that. So hopefully you have, and when you lift them and check out the problem underneath and hopefully fix the problem underneath, that you have new tiles to go back on. But it definitely that they need to be lifted to see what's going on underneath.
Mike has called from Burr and he's asking, how good is the chimney cleaning log and where are they available?
So the chimney cleaning log is a very fast way. So most people, what they would do if they have, and it's always good to say at this time of the year, obviously we're not, for most people, they're not using the stove, the range at the moment. So always try and ventilate as much as possible. So that means leave the doors in the stove open, or if that's unsightly, at least leave the damper open. Maybe leave, if you have an inspection, a soot box, leave the door and take off the door off that completely and let the air move through it. Because the one thing that causes terrible problems is a bit of condensation in the chimney, and then that runs down as black tar down the chimney. Now, what a lot of people will do is they'll burn hotspot or Comate or bluestone on a regular basis. And once they do that, it keeps it at bay, it keeps it under control. Now, what the chimney log does is it's a nuclear bomb of that. So it's a very quick way of cleaning it. Now, the question is, does it need to be very quick at this time of the year? Obviously, if you have a major problem with your chimney and you need the heat from it and it's causing a problem, well then you want it dealt with quickly. So, but you probably don't need it dealt with quickly at the moment. So I would say just ventilate as much as you can for the moment. If you're using the appliance, try the hotspot or the bluestone or the Comate. But if you do want to use that's the same as using something for 3 weeks, all in one fell swoop. And you'll get it in loads of places. Most hardware shops have it, some supermarkets have them, and you light a good fire. If nearly always a range people or a stove people are using it in, so you light a good fire, and once it's hot, you riddle it to get real heat. The hottest part would be when you riddle a fire and you get these glowing red hot coals, and then put in the chimney cleaning log on top of that, and that'll burn for 3 or 4 hours. But open up the vent, let it up the chimney, even open the windows, which obviously on a day like today you'd have them open anyway. But it's all about getting the air to move up through the chimney, that the chemical that's in that is drying out, and all that runny tar will become like a powder, and it'll clean then. So sometimes chimney sweeps will ask their customers if they have a chimney that's historically a difficult tarry chimney, they'll ask the chimney sweep, the chimney sweep will ask the householder to burn a chimney log the day before they're going to clean it out, because the job will be a much better job if you use that before you're getting the chimney cleaned.
Phil is feeling energetic and wants to paint the fence today, but asks, is it too hot? Will the paint blister? A
water-based paint is probably okay. An oil-based paint, if you're painting a fence, I would always say the best thing to use, usually if you haven't already gone down the road, is just an oil-based wood preservative. So an oil-based wood preservative just soaks into the fence. And then the beauty of that is it looks really well, but it will never peel, it will never blister, it'll never come off, it'll just eventually fade down. And there's no skill set in putting it on. It's as thin as water, you brush it on, and it lasts longer than anything else. And that can definitely be done today. The one to avoid is one that's sitting on the surface, like a thick coat of paint sitting on the surface, because very often what will happen is the outside part of the paint will form a skin, and then you end up with the paint underneath not drying properly. So particularly on metal, I wouldn't paint a fence in the heat of the sun. So wait until the sun isn't shining directly on it, and then you can go ahead and paint it with either paint, really. But on a metal gate where the gate is really hot, paint takes better to a warm gate, to warm metal, but it really doesn't like very hot metal. So that's what I would be avoiding. But look, nearly always you'll find that first thing in the morning you can paint it when the sun isn't on it, or last thing in the evening when the sun isn't on it, and that will be fine.
You're missing a trick with your marketing, by the way. Some of these products that are really simple to use, you should have a slogan. Even Will Faulkner can
Yes,
do it.
I have said that in the shop regularly. And if I don't say it, usually the customer can say it. So what I normally say, any Egypt can use it, and they normally reply with, even Will Faulkner.
Fair enough.
Yep.
Well, I expect the commission check sooner or later. Sadie was just listening to you, and it reminded her that she had forgotten to open the stove door in the sitting room. But when she did, all she could hear was this buzzing and humming from what she suspects is either a wasp's nest or a beehive. What to do?
Well, the fact that you can hear it in the stove mightn't be in the chimney. Now, look, they haven't caused you any problem. So if nobody's gotten stung and they're not visibly around the place, I personally would say just leave it alone. But maybe in the meantime, just watch outside where they're coming and going. So, the chimney is a hollow pipe and it conducts noise down into the house. So if you had a wasp nest right near in the wall cavity near the chimney, it will translate. You'll hear it coming down the chimney. Now, if you had a wasp nest in the chimney, I suppose you don't want it to continue to get bigger and bigger, although it will clean out afterwards. So sometimes people get the little bug balm and they'd put that into the stove and light it. But I would say the probability is that it's not in the chimney itself, it's just near the chimney. But I personally would leave those doors open and just keep an eye. Do you find the wasps are coming into the room from the doors? Well, then it's in the chimney itself. But it's rare enough that it's in the chimney. So I personally would leave it alone. And if you feel you want to deal with it, watch where they're coming and going from outside. So in the evening, as it's getting dark, you'll see them all returning to base, and they'll be going in through a little hole or a little gap somewhere. And if you need to deal with it in the future, you can get the wasp nest powder and put that in 3 nights in a row, and that'll be done and dusted. But if they're not causing a problem, leave them alone.
There was a remark earlier about the lake in Mullingar that is so low that now there's a hose pipe ban, and has been for some time. And Frank says, well, half of Westmeath is drawing from that lake. The population increases. What else do you expect?
Yeah.
And I suppose that brings us on to the whole conversation about piping water from the River Shannon to Dublin, and farmers receiving their information packs and some feeling under pressure. So anyway, that conversation coming later in the programme. And also today, when you have childhood cancer and you survive it, how does life afterwards change? Because you'll meet a woman who's 20 years on from her experience. She's from County Laois and she shares her story after the news at 11.
Mr. Fix-It is here to take on your DIY dilemmas. Text or WhatsApp to 083 3010 103.
Robert is in Multifarnham and he says the gates at the front of the house keep sticking, especially the one on the right. Not sure if that matters. It's doing my head in having to fight this gate every morning, evening, going to and from work. What's the best solution?
Well, look, it's one of two things. It's either a lubrication problem, so grease is better than oil, but if you want to just put on, if you have any oil in the house, like any sort of oil, even cooking oil is better than nothing. But it's grease is really, so go to your local motor factors or hardware shop or whatever and get a small tube of grease and grease it. And when you put it in, hot day like today is a great day to do it because the grease will become quite liquefied very quickly and it'll go down into the joint. So what you would be doing is putting grease all around the joint of the hinge and then open, close, open, close, open, close, open, close. Now, the question you'd be asking too is, has the gate, every door tends to sink on the hinges eventually. So is it simply that the gate has sunk on the hinges? So if you stand back and look at the gate when it's closed, say that gate that the listener is saying is on the right hand side, is it touching the ground at the very end where it's out the furthest point from the hinge? That's because the hinge has sunk a little bit and needs to be replaced. So it could be as simple as that. So is it dragging along the ground or is it up off the ground and just hard to close? So if it's up off the ground and just hard to open and close, well then just the hinge needs to be lubricated. Everything that moves needs a lubrication like that on a regular enough basis. And that will also stop the wear as well, because the problem is if you have a metal hinge, you have metal rubbing on metal with no lubrication, then the metal wears, and then, of course, the problem is that the gate will drop to the ground and drag across the ground. So that's what you're checking. When the gate is closed, is there a gap completely under the gate, as there should be? Then you're using the lubrication. If the gate's touching the ground, dragging along the ground, well, then you need to replace the hinges.
So, Robert, there's a job for the weekend. Janet is next, and she asks, does anyone know of somebody who will respring it's a two-seater leather sofa? Yeah,
there are upholstery people out there who will do it. It's a matter of looking up who in their area will take it on. And it needs to be a good sofa to make it worthwhile because, time is money and all of these jobs that require a bit of time will cost you money. So if it's a good sofa, it will be worth it.
Olivia is next. She enjoys this conversation every week and the gardening feature as well. But she hates how often the topic of Roundup or other toxic fungicides are discussed. And she says there's huge evidence, whether it's Parkinson's or cancer or other health impacts in using these products. And she is right, there is a growing body of evidence, particularly around glyphosate. And there are alternatives such as really strong vinegars that can be used to tackle weeds and indeed other biological options where it's almost like a digestive. You put it on and it eats away at the leaf of the plant, and without the leaf the plant can't survive, or the weed in this case. So yes, you're right to raise it. There are alternatives, and again we'll keep doing our homework on those. Siobhan is next. By the way, when I say we, I mean he will. Siobhan is trying to clean up the seat and the couch in the house, and it's something she should have done a long time ago, but sure, she says. The leather couch... the couch is leather, which is fine. What she's really worried about is her velvet chair. And she wants to clean her velvet chair without destroying it altogether.
A velvet chair? Very good. Well, of course,
Austin Powers hangs out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose it's a velour or a velvet, so it's a fabric is the problem. So I'd always say the first thing you try with any of those, that we'll call it velvet, that type of velour type material, is just put on loads of bread soda first. So a tub of bread soda is like €2. Get a tub or two of bread soda, and just sprinkle it on and then work it in with your hands and leave it for a day or two. You can put a towel on it and sit on it if you want, like it is completely harmless. But it does absorb quite an amazing amount of stuff in that 24, 48 hours. And then you'd give it a good hoovering. And that will remarkably take a lot of stuff out of a fabric like that, because that fabric, you don't want to drench that fabric. You don't want it getting very, very wet. And if you have to use a cleaner on it, what you would use is one of the foaming fabric cleaners. So it doesn't matter whether it says foaming fabric cleaner or foaming rug and carpet cleaner. It's the very same stuff. Loads of different brands. The best of them would be the 3M or the Scotchgard, but loads of different brands have it. And you're just rubbing it in, and because it's barely wet. It's a really good cleaning chemical, but it's very barely wet. So it doesn't drench the surface, which velour or velvet doesn't like to be really wet. And just leave it on it for about 20 minutes and then get a towel, rub it out of it, make sure and go all the same direction on the grain, and then leave it for a little while. And then once it's dry, this weather to be dry in a couple of hours, because it's not really drenched in the first place, and then hoover it out, going in the opposite direction to lift the pile back up on the velour, on the fabric, so that it looks well, and that'll leave it really, really clean. But I'd always try the bread soda first, because it's cheap and cheerful and you can't go wrong with it, and it'll almost certainly do sufficient job that you'll be happy enough with it.
Lana is in Kilminchie and says she has a beautiful old wicker chair in her conservatory. Now, she knows she can't, or at least she shouldn't, use water or soap on it, but it does need a clean. Little bits of grime have built up in the weave seat and the arm. So I've tried running the hoover over them. That hasn't worked. How do I go to DEFCON 2?
So, yeah, wicker normally tends to have a lacquer on the surface. And it was very popular back in the day, if you had a conservatory, to have a wicker chair, wicker armchair, wicker furniture. It really suits the look of a conservatory. And it is practical. It's very practical for that area. But eventually it'll get a bit grubby. And you don't want to wet it too much, because the top of the wicker is sealed with like a lacquer, or we call it a varnish. But the bottom is not, and it's very absorbent, and it can end up sagging. If it gets wet, it can end up sagging, and then when it dries out, it doesn't always go back into place again. So you're avoiding that. So what I'd always say is a nail brush, or a softish, not a really strong scrubbing brush, but a scrubbing brush. You know, you can get plastic scrubbing brushes with a handle on the top, like an old-fashioned electric iron. And what you would do is wrap a baby wipe or a damp cloth around it, and just rub, and you'll be amazed at what comes off. So the baby wipes are obviously very handy and look very cheap as well. You wrap it and you clean an area, and once the wipe is beginning to break apart and is all black, you simply get a towel and wipe off that area, and you'll be amazed what a good job it'll do, and how quickly you'll get it clean. And just an old towel and wipe. So rub, get it as clean as you can, and then wipe it dry. There won't be a huge amount of liquid there in the first place, but just wipe it dry, and you'll do an amazing job on it. And it's one of those, any job that transforms without a huge amount of effort is a very satisfying job in my book. So that's exactly what you'll do. Without major effort, you'll leave it really clean, without taking too much time and effort and money, in fairness.
All right. One more from Tom in Ballinakill in County Laois, who says herself is going through a fruit fetish at the moment.
Right.
And
yeah, it's weather for fruit, in fairness.
Absolutely, but his problem is there's a bowl in the kitchen where she keeps her fruit. He went to grab an apple himself yesterday, and a swarm of little fruit flies rose up out of the fruit bowl.
Yeah.
And he's wondering what's attracting them. He can't. But this is his point. He says it seems to be an otherwise clean bowl. So it's not like there's
they're called fruit flies because they like fruit, particularly bananas, but they like fruit in general. But so what would you do?
You don't need like naked fruit, so to speak.
No. So I would say, look, in this weather, probably in the warmest part of it, the least cold part of the fridge, and just take your fruit out half an hour before you're going to eat it is probably the first way of dealing with that. The second way is to get the horrible sticky papers and just get a plate, put on a pair of disposable gloves, wrap it around a banana skin and put it near the fruit bowl. They'll always go for a peeled banana skin quicker than anything else. And when you've the paper wrapped around it, they will stick to the paper. And then the other thing, and they work really well, there's tiny little fruit fly traps, they're called. They're only a few euros. They're the size of a golf ball, a table tennis ball. And they contain a liquid that attracts the fruit fly. And don't forget, they'll dry out quickly enough in this heat, so keep them topped up with a little bit of water every now and again to keep them active. But the fruit fly go in there and they drown basically, and they're not unsightly looking. They're yellow or green or something like that. But the feedback is they work really, really well, and as I say, the cheapest chips. But fridge, and we'd one lady, by the way, I thought it was a great idea. I know I mentioned it before, but the freezer in her fridge freezer broke. So she put the old one in the utility room and set the fridge part to the lowest setting. And now she keeps all her fruit and veg in that. The lowest setting. It's only cool as opposed to cold, but the fruit lasts so much longer. And she just she took the door off the freezer and she uses that as a storage area, and she used the fridge then for fruit and veg. And I thought it was a great idea. Yeah. Mm.
Brian, time's up. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks as always, Will.
You'll find him at Cloonan's Hardware in Tullamore if you wish to pick his brain. Best comment this morning, I think, comes from Paul in Port Arlington when we were talking about the morons, as he calls them, racially abusing the Indian community. These are the same morons who will be treated in our hospitals by Indian staff. And I was recently on the receiving end of Indian staff during a hospital stay, and I have to say, imagine the state of our health service without these people. So
here.
Well done, Paul. Brian, that brings me and my part of the show to a close, but David Hollywood is here after the news at 11.